And we are back with another episode of the Kyle and Sloan Show. I got a ton to talk about. Just so much happening around the world. We're going to touch on a little bit of everything: Gaza, Latin America, war in Ukraine. So, veterans speaking out against the genocide going on in Gaza. Trump's tantrum on True Social, and then we got, will the Ukraine war escalate? And a little bit of insight onto Trump's worldview. So let's jump right into it with this first video. This is Anthony Aguilar. He's the Green Beret who worked for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and another veteran interrupting a congressional committee and then getting arrested in the process. So let's play this first clip.
We are being arrested right now for interrupting a foreign affairs hearing on nominations because the U.S. is complicit in genocide. They are complicit in the slaughter of babies.
The United States government is complicit in genocide. You have an obligation to the Constitution of the United States. I'm a disabled veteran.
There's a genocide! There's a genocide! Stop!
You are all complicit in genocide.
You're complicit in a genocide! You're complicit in a genocide! Eddie, there's a genocide! Eddie, there's a genocide! Come on, Eddie. There's a genocide! You are complicit in genocide of the Palestinian people! You are complicit! Come on, Eddie! Eddie, help us! Eddie, help us save them! Come on, Eddie! The Israeli terrorists are committing a genocide, and the U.S. Congress and Senate are complicit in funding the bombs that are forcing children to be slaughtered and massacred. The Israeli terrorists are starving children.
Arresting us for speaking out against genocide.
Stop the bombs!
The U.S.
Stop
Congress
the bombs!
is paying for the death of children.
Slaughtering babies! We are being
So this, I think, is a really important act of defiance and speaking out on this. You know, in the U.S. culture, we really hold our veterans up to a very high standard. And for a very long time, Netanyahu, the Trump administration, even the Biden administration really tried to marginalize the pro-Palestinian movement in the U.S., or maybe even not pro-Palestinian, but the greater movement of people who want the U.S. and Israel to have a separate foreign policy, to sever the special relationship between Washington and Tel Aviv. As leftists, as young ideological college students, like kind of left over from Black Lives Matter, these are just woke, outspoken kids who they'll cool off as they get older. They're, you concerned about them being violent and things like that. But here you have two, again, veterans. Anthony Aguilar did several tours of duty. He's a very well-spoken guy. He worked in Israel, in Gaza, for the GHF as a security contractor before he couldn't do it anymore, and then blew the whistle on the operation. And these are people who, when they speak out, I do think their voice is going to be heard among the American people. They can't just be dismissed and marginalized as, out of control leftists, people who are, going crazy about all kinds of issues. No, these are people who are speaking out about this one particular issue. And I think this is a part of the growing movement and the growing divide, particularly among Republicans in the U.S. And I think that's who this protest is going to appeal to, is going to be probably Republicans more than Democrats, even if they're not partisan themselves. That's, who has more respect for the military. And so I think this is going to add to this. We saw it unfold this week at a major conference of MAGA and conservatives in Washington, D.C., where there is actually a debate on stage between Kurt Mills and Matt Abrams that it sure seems to me like Kurt did very, very well in that debate, where he was arguing against the special U.S. relationship and the endless U.S. military support for Israel, and other outspoken members of the movement, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon, Matt Gaetz, Another very prominent member of the MAGA movement has been very outspoken on this. Tucker Carlson, one of the most prominent, one of the most watched, one of the most respected, media figures in the US now, even if he's no longer part of the mainstream media, he was able to take his massive platform, massive audience off Fox News and do something even greater. And he has been, this isn't just some issue that he occasionally talks about. If you look on his show over the past 6 months, this has been one of his primary focuses. And now it's kind of funny because you'll have the Ted Cruz types use that as some kind of indictment against Tucker Carlson. Oh, this guy is clearly anti-Semitic. All he talks about is Israel. But I think it's becoming very clear that he's talking about this all the time because it's a major factor in U.S. policy. I mean, President Donald Trump even recently said that Israel has an iron grip on the American Congress that they control. Now, he said that control is slipping, but it's still there, that you still have a foreign country that the president said their lobby controls Congress. That's absolutely insane. But it is changing. I think political actions like the one taken by Aguilar today are going to make a big deal and start to really move the ball in the right direction, not just among Democrats who seem to be fairly against the ongoing war in Gaza and supporting at least Israel's military actions there, but particularly among Republicans. And even if it isn't immediately impacting Congress, it is impacting the base. And eventually, I do think there is going to be a critical mass of people. Now, the unfortunate thing is that critical mass, I do not believe, will arrive in time to save Gaza. It's probably too late. You have the Israeli finance minister now, Bezalel Smotrich, openly talking about cutting off the water, cutting off the electricity, and allowing no food into Gaza and having the entire population starve to death. And the very concerning thing is Israel is very close to doing this. It's not as if this is just some inflammatory rhetoric that can't come true. Israel effectively did this for 10 weeks already earlier this year. Now, fortunately, there was some food stockpiled in Gaza, so the people didn't immediately starve over that next week, but it set the stage for the famine that Gaza is now under. The people are starving to death, and Israel is allowing just trickles of food into the strip. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is distributing small amounts of food at their aid sites. All those are absolute death traps for the Palestinians. Since the GHF opened operations in late May, over 2,000 Palestinians at this point have been killed at or near GHF sites attempting to get food. And of course, this is by design. Anthony Aguilar has explained how these sites were set up, how they were set up on the population centers, the areas that Israel forces the Palestinians to live, is on one side of a combat zone, and the food distribution point is on the other. And so anytime a Palestinian wants to get food, they have to walk through an active combat zone. And of course, many of them have died during that process. Now, a UN panel this week reported that and made a good point. There are now at least 21,000 disabled children in Gaza, many of them orphaned. They lost an arm, a leg, or something like that, lost their hearing, their vision in the same attack that killed their parents. And so now they effectively have no one, maybe a sibling, to watch them or help them out, extended family. But whenever they need to get food, they simply can't walk the kilometers needed. And so these people are starving to death. Now, of course, the Israeli government, the mainstream media would present this as, oh, the only people starving to death are the disabled children, as if this is somehow makes it a better situation. But the reason they're the ones that are starving to death is because they're the ones that are completely unable to get to the food. But everybody in Gaza is now really struggling to get food. It is a very, very bad situation there. Now, my original point about the critical mass of Americans turning against Israel, turning against this special relationship, being too late for Palestine, is also the West Bank. This week, the finance minister, again, that's Bezalel Smotrich, rolled out a map that had Israel annexing 83% of the West Bank, leaving Gaza with just 6 little Bantustans, geographically isolated from each other. And of course, Smotrich has said the ultimate plan for Palestinians in the West Bank is giving them 3 options: subjugation, death, emigration, leaving the area. And so it is a really horrific situation that the Palestinians are facing. And Marco Rubio apparently, at least behind the scenes, gave Israel at least some green light on moving forward with annexation in the West Bank. That this is, I think, really concerning. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Netanyahu bats off a small church's plan to annex 83% of the West Bank. I mean, this would be horrific. And not only that, it would create a very similar situation like South Africa, apartheid South Africa, with the Bantu stance, where the Palestinians are economically and not economically, geographically isolated in just these small little communities dispersed throughout the West Bank. But even moving forward with small annexations of the West Bank could cut the bisect the West Bank or in more different little pieces and really create a problem for any future Palestinian state. I mean, they would never be able to have a continuous state. So it's important to keep putting pressure, to keep talking about these issues, but at the same time, the special relationship between the US and Israel, and particularly Donald Trump's just utter subservience to Netanyahu, constantly talking about how he wants to be the most pro-Israeli president ever, has really set the stage for this annexation. Now, moving on here, I guess before I move on, I want to talk about our great new sponsor, the Expat Money Summit 2025, which of course is put together by Mikhail Thorup, the host of the Expat Money Show. I've been on with Mikhail before. He is an absolute great guy, very interested in the subjects that we talk about here on this show. And his free online event is packed with real strategies you can use to enhance your freedom and global mobility right now, like acquiring second residences and citizenships, legally mitigating your tax burden, purchasing international real estate, holding precious metals offshore, and more. This year's summit is focused on Latin America, and for good reason. The opportunities presented by countries like Argentina and El Salvador are important. So this is a summit is running for 3 days from October 10th to October 12th, and Mikhail is bringing together top tier experts on helping you build your offshore plan B quickly and effectively in the region. I am actually one of those experts he's talking about. I will be on one of the VIP panels for that event. So if you want to get a VIP ticket, you could do that at a discount by using promo code Kyle. That's KYLE at expatmoneysummit.com. So get your ticket for the Expat Money Summit 2025. All right, so moving on here, I want to talk about Donald Trump's tantrum. He had this post on Truth Social this week where he said, and he brings up here, the big question to be answered is whether or not President Xi of China will mention the massive amount of support and blood the United States of America gave to China in order to help it secure its freedom from a very unfriendly foreign invader. Many Americans died in China's quest for victory and glory. I hope they are rightfully honored and remembered for their bravery and sacrifice. May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give your warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America. So Xi holds an 80th anniversary commemorating the end of World War II. And rather than, I guess, just letting the Chinese have their day to celebrate, Trump tries to make it about the United States of America, which, like, you could note, and if he wanted to try to make a statement of joint solidarity with the Chinese, talk about how, the Americans played a role in the end of World War II and how that helped China, sure. But he goes on to claim that by having this event, by having world leaders like Modi, Putin, and Kim Jong-un attend the event, that they are somehow conspiring against the United States of America. Now, I think this post is actually really important and insightful into Trump's mind at this point, where he's giving us some insight on how he feels, and that is, China is building a world order that is conspiring against the US, and it's limiting the options that he has when it comes to trying to end the war in Ukraine. Now, of course, the best option, and I know this, that Trump has to end the war in Ukraine, is simply to go to Zelensky, tell him he's going to cut off the arms support, and if he doesn't, or he's going to cut out the arms support if Zelensky doesn't agree to a reasonable deal to end the war, right? But he's not going to do that. So his solution is to put more pressure on Russia. The problem with that is we've already put economic sanctions on Russia. He doesn't want to go to direct warfare with Russia. And so his options now are to try to put more penalties on countries that do business with Russia, which are primarily China and India. The problem there is he's already tried to put massive tariffs on China. He's had to roll them back. They're going to greatly hurt the American economy. And he's tried to put tariffs on India. The problem is we don't do enough business with India where those tariffs are making a huge impact. And so now his solution, this is actually just breaking today. There was a big summit of European leaders with Zelensky. They call it the Coalition of the Willing in France. And there, President Emmanuel Macron called President Donald Trump. And after that event, the White House gave a statement to Fox News, and it didn't say anything about supporting Ukraine. It was really just focused on how the Europeans need to stop buying Russian oil and how the Europeans need to start putting economic penalties on China, something I think Europe is very unlikely to do. But again, I think this shows the kind of roadblocks that Trump is facing as he tries to end the war in Ukraine, where he's unwilling to put pressure on Zelensky and unable to put pressure on Putin in Russia. Trump had a press conference with the Polish president on Wednesday. And during one of his very rambling answers, he got into the war in Ukraine and his efforts to end it. And he's going on about how he's ended all these wars. He's ended seven wars. He thought it would be hard to end all these wars, but he thought that the war in Ukraine would be very easy to end, and he's been unable to end it. He kind of lamented how tough it's been, how he struggled to do so. And so I think this, again, is just really important to understand Trump's mindset right now, where he's frustrated with his inability to end the war. He's kind of gone through the avenues the U.S. has to pressure Russia that they're willing to use. And so I think his next step is going to be pressuring Europe to go after and tariff and sanction both India and China for continuing to do business with Russia. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to work. I think this alternative world economic bloc that's building that includes rivals. It's very hard to imagine all these countries actually getting along. However, the common hatred that all of them and animosity that they face from the United States has driven many countries together that have long-standing historical grievances. India, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. And I just read today again that China is building some kind of oil drill for Venezuela that they're going to have floating out in the Caribbean Sea. And you see all these countries building stronger and stronger, more powerful relationships, and it's going to actually limit more and more and more what the U.S. is able to do on the world stage. If India has a strong economic partnership with China, then that's going to disincentivize the Indian government to join anti-Chinese alliances that the U.S. is trying to build in Asia surrounding China. So this is a big deal. Now, next up, I want to play this clip of Putin's advisor discussing Trump's remarks.
On social media, President Donald Trump, I sincerely hope, not without a touch of irony, indeed not without a significant degree of irony, expressed that he extends his warmest regards to Chairman Xi Jinping and respectfully requests him to also convey his very best and most friendly wishes to President Vladimir Putin and to the esteemed Chairman of State Affairs of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, respectively, in a truly diplomatic gesture. And once again, I think not entirely without a certain degree of irony, he explicitly stated that supposedly these three individuals were actively plotting a significant conspiracy against the sovereign United States of America. Now, I want to say that no one was organizing any conspiracies, no one was scheming anything, there were no conspiracies. Moreover, no one even had such thoughts. None of these three leaders had such thoughts. Besides that, I can say that everyone understands the role played by the United States, the current administration of President Trump, and President Trump himself in the current international situation.
So I think he really makes a good point there at the end that the reason the international situation is the way it is now is because of Donald Trump. All of his wild tariffs, all these sanctions, all these different wars that he's starting, bombing Iran, bombing Yemen, now starting to bomb Venezuela, is going to get the U.S. into a lot of trouble. And so by going down this path that Trump has put us on, we are in a lot of trouble. And it's not that these countries are necessarily trying to conspire against the U.S. It's that the United States has driven them into a position where their best alternative is to join an economic bloc with each other. Next up here, I want to talk about, will the Ukraine war escalate? First, playing this clip from Vladimir Putin.
And after we, at the insistent urging of our Western European colleagues, withdrew our troops from Kiev, the situation immediately changed, and we were told, almost verbatim, now we will fight until either you tear our heads off or we tear yours off. I don't remember whether I've ever said this publicly or not, but that's roughly how it sounded. Only in cruder terms, but quite openly, and oddly enough, in a sort of comradely way. So now it's either us or you. Well, and this all continues.
So yeah, I think this is really just a direct statement from Putin about the reality of the situation, that the Ukrainians, their Western backers, really don't want this war to end. That the war is the preferable situation, not for the Ukrainian people, to be clear, but for elements within the Ukrainian government, including Ukrainian President Zelensky, and particularly the right-wing neo-Nazi factions within Ukraine, who have continued to gain and take more and more power in their country, and who could be poised to lead Ukraine post-war or a collapse of the Ukrainian government. And so the situation there is that the people in Ukraine who have the power to decide whether to fight or not want to fight on. The Europeans and the Americans have been very explicit that they see this whole thing as an opportunity to weaken Russia. Even if it takes 10 Ukrainian soldiers to kill a Russian soldier, that still means there's one less Russian soldier at the end of the day. And that is their goal in all of this, to be very clear. And so Putin is just being dread that the Europeans want to fight, and that the Russians at this point are saying that our core national security interests are threatened in a way where we have to fight. And so this war is just going to go on and on. Now, I want to play this next clip. This is former National Security Advisor John Bolton calling for a major U.S. escalation.
What Putin has here is a long-range strategy to take control of Ukraine. This is part of his goal to recreate the Russian Empire. He's been very clear on that in public statements for 20 years. So despite the enormous human cost to the Russians and to the Ukrainians, he's only roughly doubled Russian control of Ukrainian territory from the first assault in 2014. I think any pause in the fighting is just the preliminary so that Russia can rebuild and restock its army and get ready for the third offensive.
So this is absolutely insane. Talking about another offensive. This war needs to end. It does not need to escalate. Today at the coalition of the Willie meeting, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is talking about they're going to send Ukraine more long-range missiles, more than the 3,350 they just approved to send to Ukraine last week and will be arriving in Ukraine in the coming weeks. Long-range cruise missiles, they're going to send them more and more and more. Trump is talking about how the Ukrainians need to play offense. Doing so is going to escalate this conflict. And of course, the Russians are going to respond with their own escalation. They're not going to take Ukraine striking their oil refineries and say, oh boy, this war is really starting to take a toll on our country. Maybe we should settle and give back the Donbass and Crimea. Putin is never going to do this. The Russian demands to end this conflict are now at the end of the line of Russian red lines. They're not willing to accept less than what they're currently asking for. And so if the West escalates their support for Ukraine, Russia will just continue to grind away at the Ukrainian military. They'll conduct more strikes inside of Ukraine, destroy more infrastructure, make life for the just daily average Ukrainian worse and worse and worse. They'll absolutely destroy that nation if they have to, because they believe if they end this war, where the West decides that they're going to put 100,000 troops in Ukraine, that's a major security concern for Russia. They don't want Americans providing air support to the Ukrainians post-war. That's what that's what the Europeans are asking for. And so this is, I think, really on a path until one side or the other prevails. And of course, the West could continue to flood Ukraine with weapons and escalate their support for Ukraine. And in doing so, they are going to hurt Russia more. But Ukraine will pay a bigger price at the end. And that's really the important point of all of this. And the point so many of us anti-interventionists have been making all along is not that we don't want to support Ukraine because it's good for Russia, but by supporting Ukraine, by not encouraging Ukraine to take the deal that they had on the table, either before the war began or in the months after it began, where at that time, Russia was willing to live with just taking the Crimean Peninsula. They were willing to withdraw out of the Donbass, go back to the Minsk framework. At that time, after the invasion happened, and the West told Ukraine not to take the deal. And so by encouraging the Ukrainians to fight on and fight more, Ukraine is going to lose more. All right, before we wrap up here, I have one more clip of Donald Trump. This is an interesting insight into his current mindset and worldview.
Because without the United States, everything in the world would die. It's true. It's so powerful. It's so big, and I made it really big in the first 4 years. Then it started to degenerate with what this Biden administration did. But we've built it up to a level that I never thought we could be at this quickly. We're the hottest. We're the best financially. The money coming in is so big because of tariffs and other things, but because of tariffs. Tariff gets us even those other things. Plus, it gets us great negotiators. I settled 7 wars, and numerous of those wars were because of trade. And
so this is insane that Trump is going around claiming that he settled 7 wars. I don't think that's even true by his own count, but looking at like the situation Azerbaijan and Armenia, it's not as if that was a hot conflict at the time. It's been on the back burner. They agreed to a deal, but it's not clear that conflict's going to end. There's still unrest in the Congo, and some of these other conflicts he's saying he ends. It's just not true. And plus, the actual conflicts that he could end, he could leverage the American military support to Ukraine and Israel to demand Zelensky take the deal that Russia has on the table, maybe get a few more concessions or something like that, but take the broad framework of the deal that Russia is offering and bring that war to an end. He could go to Netanyahu today, tomorrow, or any day of the week and say another American bomb, another American dollar, another American bullet will not enter the country of Israel if you do not end this onslaught in Gaza, this war in Gaza tomorrow. If you do not allow more food into Gaza tomorrow, we will never give Israel any more military aid again. And Israel would have to comply. They would have to comply. They have no other choice. Trump could end that war within minutes, within hours, by picking up the phone and talking to Benjamin Netanyahu. And yet he refuses to do it because, as we said in the beginning, Donald Trump's first priority is being an Israel first president, to be the greatest president to Israel that America has ever had. It's just like Ted Cruz when he says, I got elected with a mission to go to Congress and support the state of Israel. No, your mission, if you're an elected American president, if you're an elected American senator, your mission is to represent the American people, not a foreign country. So really disturbing there. And also this idea that America needs to be the savior of the world. This is almost exactly what the American people rejected when they were embracing Donald Trump in 2016. They were done of the Bush era, go around the world, upend dictators, create democracy, nation building. They were done with the Obama and Clinton responsibility to protect. They saw Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen, all in absolute ruins because of US interventionism, and understood that we were not going around the world killing bad guys, getting rid of terrorists. No, we were going around the world killing a lot of people, creating more anti Americanism, getting our men and women in arms killed, wasting millions, billions, trillions of dollars on these absolutely pointless and useless wars. And so Trump gets it completely wrong, upends everything that he had previously, said. And I think why people support him, what people thought America first was. Well, that'll do it for the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Kyle Anslow Show this week. We will be back next week with a full list of shows Monday, Wednesday, Thursday at 4:45 Eastern Time. Our old friend Joe Twillinger is coming back to the show on Monday, so I'm very much looking forward to that one. I apologize for the very loud dog in the background. She wants to get outside, and for me to wrap it up here. And of course, follow me on X at Kyle Anslow _ where you can find all my work. I write at antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute, and judgenap.com. And of course, share, subscribe, follow this show. Best place to do that is YouTube. Thanks, everyone.